Hello, everyone. Today, our topic for discussion is risk analysis, turning uncertainty into strategy. This is a strategic framework for transforming business challenges into competitive advantage. I am your RISMA buddy, Dr. Dennis Edegon. Every organization today faces some strategic decisions about their survival, about their profitability, about everything about the organization looking into the future. Therefore, it becomes necessary to look at the strategic imperative. And risk management drives survival, growth, and our performance in volatile markets. The world is changing rapidly. The business environment is very volatile, and we, as risk professionals and business people, must always scan the environment and put in place certain things that will allow us, navigate these uncertainties. And experience show that the line between risk and uncertainty has become more and more blurred. Therefore, strategic decision making demands tools to turn ambiguity into actionable insights for competitive advantage. Today, we will distinguish between risk and uncertainty, though the two words can be used interchangeably sometimes, but we're going to see the differences between both. We will explore frameworks for systematic risk analysis, because in our previous video we talked about risk identification. When we identify our risk and create a risk register, we need to go a step further to analyze those risks in order to gauge the likelihood and impact of each of the events. Also today we'll learn practical tools and implementation strategies. We'll discover how to transform risk into strategic opportunities. Now, let's try to understand uh, risk and uncertainty. By definition, risk is future events where potential outcomes are unknown, but probabilities can be estimated or calculated based on historical data and models. On the other hand, uncertainty is defined as incomplete, ambiguous, or rapidly evolving information, which prevents reliable prediction. I'd like to take that again. Uncertainty can be defined as incomplete, ambiguous, or rapidly changing information, which prevents reliable predictions. Why do we need to look at these differences? Because distinguishing between them is crucial for strategy and resource decisions. Mistaking uncertainty for risk breeds blind spots and false confidence. Therefore, it is absolutely important to look at both. The table below shows the characteristics of risk and uncertainties. For instance, let's look at measurability. Risk is quantifiable, can be modeled. On the flip side, uncertainty is not quantifiable and cannot be modeled. Management approach. For risk, management can put in place mitigation mechanism, transfer the risk to a third party, and decide on which risk to accept based on the risk appetite of the organization. Uncertainties management approach usually are adaptability, resilience, and scenario planning. Decision making framework. For risk, there's structured data driven framework. For uncertainties, there are flexible judgment based framework that can be used. Examples: risk, market volatility, credit default, operational failure. Uncertainties, disruptive technology, regulatory changes or compliance. As you can see, there are little differences between risk and uncertainties. So let's look at frameworks for managing risk. At the beginning of this course, I introduced the ISO 31000 framework, which usually can be seen as the first principle of risk management, as it were. However, in embedding the course framework makes our risk management more robust because it will take a three-dimensional look at risk, as we are going to see going forward. So the course of these two frameworks usually provide structured approach to identify, assess, and manage enterprise-wide risk systematically because they help to create a risk-aware culture across the board, from the shop floor up to um, the management level. The cost framework aligns strategy and performance, which boosts value creation across all levels, like I said before, from the shop floor to the top management level. The cost framework has 5 core components, starting with the governance and culture, which usually sets the tune, reinforces importance, and establishes oversight responsibility across the board. The second core component is strategy and objective setting, which allows organization to align risk appetite with strategy and defines the business objectives. The third component is performance, which helps to identify, assess, and prioritize risk to execution. As you're going to see, when we assess our risk, we are able to quantify the risk and assign, based on the value, what we call risk ranking, we can then determine the urgent risk and those that we can cope with for the time being. The fourth component is review and revision, which helps to evaluate effectiveness and consider substantial changes that may be made to existing risk mitigation strategies based on our assessment of their effectiveness. Information communication and reporting is the last component of the causal ERM framework, and it helps to share risk information across the organization. So there is no silo mentality when you use the causal ERM and framework because it creates that risk-aware culture across the board. Why is this important? It is important because it enables holistic view of the interconnected nature of risk. Risks are usually interconnected Because one activity or one event can lead to a cascading effect. It helps to improve resource allocation, strengthens decision making, and builds organizational resilience. The process is like this, starting with risk identification, risk assessment, prioritization of risk, response, and monitoring, which are also similar to the ISO 31000 risk management framework. In risk identification, we identify strategic, operational, financial, and compliance risk through stakeholder input while scanning the environment and the use of data. In assessing the risk, it helps us to assess risk quantitatively or qualitatively for likelihood and impact. There, we are able to judge the probability and the consequences if such event do happen. In prioritization, we look at the risk and rank them and prioritize them based on the impact they may have on the organization as well as the appetite of the organization in order to help us to, you know, focus our resources accordingly. Risk response planning. This addresses risk by accepting, avoiding, transferring, mitigating, or exploiting them. Now, this brings a very interesting part of risk management. Usually, risk is seen as as something negative, but risk is like the two sides of a coin. There's a positive part of risk, there's also the negative part. The negative part of risk we call threats. The positive parts are opportunities. So when we identify opportunities in the market, we exploit them and take advantage of such opportunities. Again, we need to monitor and review continuously because risk management is not done once and for all. Risk management is an ongoing process. As we take action to address certain risk, we must review to see whether the action we are taking are effective or not. And having taken some actions, it's also important to review or to monitor and review to see if those risks are no longer relevant because they have been addressed so that we don't waste resources on them anymore. We can move forward to other aspects. So this is very important and this process must be followed in a systematic manner. Now, as you can see, we've talked about quantitative and qualitative methodologies for managing risk. Presented here are the different tools that are available, tools or techniques that can be used in risk analysis. Let's look at the quantitative tools. Monte Carlo simulation is one of such. The value at risk is another one. Decision tree analysis is a very helpful tool, and sensitivity analysis. These are quantitative methodologies for analyzing risk, which helps us to see, the assign figures or numbers to the magnitude and magnitude and the likelihood of occurrence of those events. Similarly, there are qualitative analysis tools that usually use, the judgment of experienced people who have been dealing with risk. SWOT analysis is one. SWOT analysis helps us to, you know, look at the strengths and weaknesses of the organization within and the opportunities and threats out there in the external environment. Remember, risk can be positive, can be negative. Positive risk are opportunities. Negative risk are threats. So SWOT analysis can help us to have a broader look at what is going on out there, and based on the strengths and weaknesses within, we can then put in place um, proper approach to address the risk. The DEFA technique is another one. It's a structured communication process using experts' opinion. Here you can put people, experts in various areas together, and they address, they ask the what if questions, and based on their judgment, they are able to identify the best way to address the issue. The BOTA analysis is another one. The BOTA analysis is very useful because it helps to map causes, threats, and consequences of risk events. Scenario planning is a fourth qualitative methodology. It explores alternative future states and response strategies. Again, there is no one size suits all in all cases. Each of these different methods can be used at different times. So for the quantitative method, it can be used when numerical data is available and very reliable. So please bear that in mind. If the data are not reliable, you may need to dig deeper. Precise risk estimates are needed for financial decisions. Comparing investment alternatives. Regulatory compliance requires statistical evidence, of course. Setting risk threshold and limits. So if the situation you face is one of these, then the quantitative methodology is a better approach. You can use the qualitative analysis method when there are limited historical data, when evaluating strategic or emerging risk, when initial risk identification and scanning is important, and building organizational consensus of risk, and finally assessing operational and reputational risk. Like I said before, there is no one size fits all in this case or in all cases, so a combination of either of these can also be used very effectively. So for comprehensive risk analysis, you can combine both and use quantitative methods for identification and prioritization, and then apply quantitative techniques to high priority risk. Now, don't forget, risk is like the two sides of a coin, the positive and the negative. When we spot opportunities in the market, we need to take advantage of them. So that's why we say here that we can turn risk into opportunities. First, strategic reframing. Risk analysis reveals hidden opportunities, turning threats into competitive advantage. Strategic positioning. Strong risk intelligence lets firms seize opportunities others avoid. Resilience innovation. Risk-aware firms innovate faster with calculated risk, controlling exposure as smartly as possible. Stakeholder confidence. Transparent risk management fosters trust, enabling better terms and partnerships. Regulatory advantage. Strategic risk management enables faster, smarter navigation of regulations that are than rivals. What that means is that from time to time we are scanning the environment for changes and we are making adjustments as required, because most times governments across the world can change their regulations without consulting anybody. But if we are risk aware and we are constantly scanning the environment, we can more or less predict what might happen next. Best practices for strategic implementation. The first thing, which is foundational, is to foster a risk-aware culture across the board, from the shop floor all the way to, from the shop floor to the top level of the organization. Because that helps encourage risk transparency, recognize good judgment, and protect consent sharing of information as they emerge. It has to align leadership and accountability. It has to clarify risk accountability tied to performance and demand execution engagement. If we write procedures or processes or policies without proper monitoring and execution, it means nothing. Implement risk appetite framework. We need to quantify how much risk we can tolerate and embed that culture enterprise-wide across the organization and inform strategic choices. Establish continuous review cycle. Like I said before, risk management is continuous. Because it's continuous, we must continuously monitor what's going on, make adjustments as we go based on lesson learned, and implement better risk management uh, approach. Here is a snapshot of some case studies. ExxonMobil ERM implementation. ExxonMobil implemented a comprehensive multi-layered ERM framework with clear roles and accountability across the organization. And by doing this, it helped them to integration of five core elements enable effective risk management across all operational levels. Pay.UK risk reporting transformation. It helped them to achieve 50% faster risk reporting in just 6 months by streamlining processes and implementing advanced analytics. With the use of AI today, we have better tools at our hands or in our hands that can help us to be more proactive in our risk management. The COVID-19 shut down the entire world in 2019-2020. Strong crisis leadership, transparency, and interdependence awareness define organizations who thrive during that most trying period of my life. Because I've never experienced COVID before, but that was the first one, and hopefully that's the last one. Adaptive enterprises avoided recurring crisis cycles through proactive risk assessment. Many organizations went under, some organizations went up too. Amazon is an example of an organization that thrived during the COVID era. First Tech Federal Credit Union. They transform its risk culture by embedding risk awareness into daily operations and decision-making process. By doing that, culture shift led to improved risk identification and preemptive mitigation strategies. And the rest is history because they were very successful. Here I present future trends in risk management because the world is evolving and it is going to continue to evolve. Artificial intelligence and advanced analytics is going to become more applicable in risk management because today AI-driven risk tools improve management but raise ethical concerns notwithstanding. In any case, those ethical concerns can also be mitigated. Evolving cyber landscape. Evolving cyber risks target operational technology requiring stricter compliance and enterprise risk management. Climate change and ESG risk. Address weather extremes, policy changes, and climate demands strategically, because there are policies, there are regulations across the world in this area, and failure to comply is a risk of its own. Systemic and interconnected risk. Modern risk span borders, requiring cross-section vigilance and preparation. Because risk, you know, something can be happening in one part of the world and the ripple effect is felt across the globe. So we must be very much aware of what those is so that we can proactively take steps to mitigate the impact. Ladies and gentlemen, here is my conclusion and key takeaways. Risk analysis transforms uncertainty into measurable, manageable opportunities. Systemic frameworks provide structure to identify, assess, and respond to risk. Strategic integration of risk management creates competitive advantage. Therefore, organizations must develop a clear risk capital framework aligned with strategic objectives. Organizations must implement both quantitative and qualitative risk assessment tools. Organizations must foster a risk-aware culture with clear governance and accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, risk management isn't about eliminating uncertainties. It's about transforming it into strategic advantage. Thank you very much. My name remains Dr. Dennis Edogun. I will see you again in my next video. God bless you.